Hello and welcome to this special report from Black and White on the issues of today that are important to all of us. In this special report, you will hear from important people who are knowledgeable about the subject matter we're going to discuss so you can keep abreast of the important issues of today. Now, let's go to Dan and Daryl. Welcome back. We're fortunate enough that we were able to get our Lieutenant Colonel, who was on just a week or so ago, before all hell broke loose. And unfortunately, he came us on Friday night. If it had been Monday, it would have been different. So we're talking today with a gentleman who was on before, and it's Lieutenant Colonel Surges Sangari. Is that close enough?
Sangari.
I apologize. Thank you for joining us today, Colonel.
It's good to be here, Dan.
Daryl and I have been talking about what we want to try and accomplish with you. And what's important is that our audience needs to understand that you have an extensive background. You're retired military, but retired Special Operations Command. And for those of us who are in the military, we understand that. But for the lots of people who don't understand, that's a very important, critical, many times highly secretive job. And I thank you for your service. It was greatly appreciated. So what I'm trying to figure out is we have three questions that we want to focus on with you today. First one was, from your perspective, what was wrong with what the Biden administration did? Two, based on your expertise, what should they have done? And number three, given the president's actions, what do you think we should be doing going forward? So let's start with the first one. What's wrong with, from your perspective, what Biden did?
Dan, it's good to be here. Thanks again. And sure. Thank you very much for your service to the nation and being a former vet. And I know it's hard for all of us. Trust me. I'm a member of the foreign, I'm one of the legions here, and a lot of our guys out of Vietnam. Trust me, it brings back some bad memories as to what's going on. They didn't think they were going to relive some of those memories, just in the same lifetime twice. You can say what they did wrong, but if it was a planned operation, and I've said this before, either it's ineptitude across the board or somebody has to come to the realization that maybe it was done on purpose. And that question has to be asked. Anybody with a logical mind looking at the fact that we left all this equipment in Bagram has to ask, did we leave it there on purpose? And I think I have said after post-mortem starts, it is very important that for the congressional folks, whoever they are, on both sides of the aisle, to ask that question as you bring individuals from the Department of Defense, Department of State, hopefully, if there is an investigation that takes place, and ask them directly, did we leave that equipment there on purpose? And just let it be for the record. Go ahead, sir.
I was an enlisted man, not an officer, but thank you for your courtesy. I have to stop you because I want to make sure I heard what you were saying. You think there's a possibility that the people in command made a decision to the order that they decided to withdraw, purposely leaving billions of dollars worth of equipment going to the Taliban's hands. Now, I have to ask you, Colonel, a decision like that was not made, and no disrespect to your rank, wasn't made by a colonel. Somebody had to go to Milley and say, hey, here's an idea. Why don't we just leave it all there? We don't have to transport it. And would Milley, under what you're saying, would Milley have been the decision maker, or would he have gone to the president to get permission to do that?
Well, it might be that it was above Milley too. Milley may be just executing orders, maybe not understanding. You have to be in the back room to see what Milley may have said to the president, saying, well, this is crazy. But just so you know, last month, the day after I got the word that we left the equipment, I got on a bird. I went up to DC, met with whoever I could reach out and touch, congressional side of the House, people that I know. I made a phone call to senatorial staff and also met in person with House staff and said, somebody's got to go and get this equipment, or you got to go ahead and right now start asking what's going on. Because if I know it, and I'm sitting in Skokie, Illinois, the Iranians, the Chinese, the Russians know it, and the Taliban. And so when you said your question was based on the premise that maybe it was a mistake, it could have been maybe a decision they made from a foreign policy perspective, and part of it was to leave equipment there. Right now, Taliban has equipment in its hands that makes it a juggernaut as far as its ability to reach out and touch anybody on the battlefield. Unfortunately for us, as we leave Americans behind, and I've said this too, the Taliban's already starting to shop for pilots for those aircrafts that we left behind. And the second they get them, and we have Americans that are left behind, and you're an American trying to negotiate through tribal lands with no money in your pockets and trying to get to those mountain passes, they will use those aircrafts. Now they have air superiority that you will not be able to maneuver to any place that might give you safe haven. And they've already started selling that to the Iranians for oil, which started 4 days ago, bringing oil again, which was stopped for a couple of months to Afghanistan. The Chinese aren't going to take the equipment, but they're going to at least take them and look through them to see, is there anything here that they still haven't, stolen from our military through the back doors through Taiwan, because we have a lot of companies that sit there. The TSMC itself being an American company registered the back door for possible F-35 steal of AI technology that was given to the Chinese Communist Party. So this equipment is not going to just sit on the shelf. You buy a toy, you're going to play with it. So either you're going to play with it to cause havoc, or you're going to play with it to strengthen your political capability. And the fact that we're already negotiating with the Taliban, and I had asked the question on the 19th of August, are we going to pay money to the Taliban? And it seems that we have already started giving them money, and they're not asking for millions, they're asking for billions. So not only did you give them military equipment, you're giving them money. I don't know if that is a mistake you made or that was a deliberate decision that you had made as to strengthening the capability of the Taliban government as it sits in Afghanistan currently. How are you going to use them to your benefit? That's a question we could get into more details on.
Colonel, I have to say, I can't imagine the ineptitude of anybody trying to convince somebody else in the administration that there was a perfectly logical reason why they left billions upon billions of offensive weapons when they walked out. I mean, I heard Donald Trump say that his plan always was, first, use the big air base. Second, get all the Americans out. 3, get all the munitions out. 4, bring the soldiers out. And 5, bomb the hell out of the base. But it's still very logical sequence of how you're going to withdraw. And I was never an officer, but I was in intelligence corps, and I understand that made all the sense in the world. But it seems like what we did, Colonel, is we did it ass backwards. And I'm thinking to myself, the Secretary of Defense is an embarrassment to me. I mean, he has a hard time walking and chewing gum at the same time, and that's a problem. Milley before Congress spending so much time talking about, well, I understand, I have to learn more about wokeness, and I have to learn more about critical race theory, and we have to instruct our. No, you don't. You go out and fight, and you've got a hot spot. You shouldn't be distracted by this other stuff. You've got Americans' lives at risk and all this weaponry. I just am so disgusted at the inability of the leadership of the military unless they were totally overruled by the administration, the politicians. And then I'm really pissed at the politicians because they have no clue what should be done anyway. And for them to make decisions is crazy.
Look, just so people understand how we got to this point. When the previous POTUS, President Trump came in, he put sanctions on Iran. He got out of the quote unquote nuclear deal. It was more of an economic deal. I had said that from the day that was struck, and part of it was to try to save Europe more than us. I know that under Obama, they were trying to, the first people that actually ended up in Iran after that deal was struck was the American oil companies. The problem was that the Europeans were going in, actually paying for folks in Iran on the ground to come out and protest in front of the areas and that they were having meetings with the Iranian businessmen. And they were paying him to scream death to America. And then they were turning around to those businessmen saying, look, your own people are saying death to America. Instead of striking a deal with the Americans companies directly, why don't you have those companies come through European companies, us, and strike a deal with us? So Obama thought that even before he became president, he was still running. He was negotiating with the Iranians. His folks were already talking to them before he was elected to be a president. And he figured that this way, you know, American companies would control everything and realize that, no, actually the Europeans were able to backdoor us there. Now, when Trump came in and got rid of that deal and put sanctions on Iran, he did one thing. He kept Port of Charbahar in Iran open, which is a port that is very significant, strategic in the Gulf. He removed it from sanctions, and he told the Indian government, which was a counterforce against China, go ahead and build that port for the Iranians and run a railhead for them into Afghanistan. In this process, he put pressure on Pakistan, which was harboring the Taliban, realizing that America was squeezing now Pakistan financially by possibly in the future having an agreement with Iran, if there was a future agreement, completely devastating Pakistan's ability to counter anybody, because most of the Pakistan governmental leaders were on the payroll of the Chinese companies anyway, conglomerates that were operating everywhere in that region. So China having a $60 billion contract with the Pak government, almost like a Marshall deal, realized that if they don't bring the Taliban to the table, they were going to be checkmated, and they were probably going to lose a lot of that $60 billion infrastructure deal that China had. And China asked them to do that because it knew it was going to lose its footprint within the region and possibly set back decades when it came to his Belt and Road Initiative that was trying to build through Afghanistan and Pakistan. So Trump did what he did. He squeezed them and brought them to the table. However, before negotiations began, he sat with the Taliban leadership and said, I know where you live. I know where your family lives. I know where your business deals are. And I do know where your villages are. Now, I can kill you in an instant. If you still want to negotiate, you're ready to go negotiate, let's go. Then he put him in the negotiation table. The problem was when Biden became the president, the Taliban started testing this new person, as any other major nation would, to see if he's willing to stick to that deal. And when they realized that he is willing to forego anything that the Taliban had to meet those deal requirements, then it was a matter of, you know, the deal is done. There's a new deal, maybe not on paper, but in discussion. Now, if Biden administration didn't like the deal that President Trump had made, then Biden could have done what he did on the first day when he came in. He undone everything that the previous POTUS had done with a signature. He could have said, I'm not going to follow this either. But he changed the parameters of the deal non-verbally when he left the equipment on Bagram. Now, not everybody in the type of missions we've done, and as you mentioned, you know, with Special Operational Command, sometimes the general officers are not read into it, but they got to be smart enough. They have to be capable enough to realize this might be a disaster. Instead of, you know, paying attention to wokeism, if you have studied anything about the region, understand what's about to happen, you could have easily walked in and told the POTUS, said, sir, you do this, you're going to give everything to the Chinese, because as much as you may think that you could use the Taliban to counter China, China's already bought them to a tune, and there's no way the Taliban is going to be able to walk away from it. The best thing that can happen for the United States is if Afghanistan doesn't break into a civil war, but implodes, literally implodes, because that's the only way you're going to set back the Chinese by a decade. And if I was a general officer in the US military, I would walk in, I would give that advice to the POTUS. Say, you're playing with a really bad fire here. And if you notice, since then, the Saudis already broke a defense cooperation agreement with the Russians just a few days ago. And Russia has already sat in meetings with the current Iraqi government. United States wanted under Obama to leave the Middle East, but wanted to pivot to South America. The previous POTUS came in, wanted to leave the Middle East, but pivoted towards China to buffer them because we were losing across the board against China over decades. The current president came in, he wants us out of the Middle East, but he wants to again allow China to be the main primary winner within the region. If that happens, then you might as well forget about everything you're dealing with, because of the fact that their companies already are set up to steal our intellectual property. If they control Pakistan, they control Afghanistan, they build this road network. What you just did, Mr. President, you allowed the Shanghai Cooperation Organization that was created by China, led by China, that was created 20 years, this year is their jubilee, now became the lead. It was created to counter NATO, and NATO is leaving, bugging out, and one of the worst defeats it could claim in its history. And you really have just opened up the coffers. The Iranians are going to get the technology to include those night vision goggles that they couldn't buy because of under restrictions. Right now, they're getting it for free from the Taliban for oil, which is coming through northern Iraq from the Kurds that are driving it through Iran, giving it to the Taliban. So you even lost that ally that you had in the region, as the Chinese are teaching Mandarin Chinese to the Russians. Now, Millie, you had to know this stuff. And if you didn't know it, this is a problem you run into, Don. Our leadership within the Department of Defense are not concentrating on developing strategic thinkers for the country. They're just developing individuals who have general knowledge on issues, and a lot of those issues in the military are not concentrating on winning the war.
Colonel, thank you for that. It's my time to turn it over to my co-host, Daryl, who has some thoughts about and questions about what you just said. Daryl?
I have to start off. Thank you, Colonel. According to UCMJ, somebody just committed treason by leaving our products behind. Who would you say is at fault? In all honesty, I mean, to be point blank.
Well, they're going to blame it on contractors because we have a lot of contractors on the ground. Even the biometrics, almost 7,000 biometric equipment are left behind that the Taliban is using to discover who are the people who work with the Americans. And at the same time, you have the Chinese who are now, using that, adding their AI into those biometrics. That means that individual, whoever that is, that if he ever want to use, will never be able to be used in the future. Now think about it. When the Central Intelligence Agency chief goes and meets with the Taliban, 2 days later, there's a bombing. That's in the Middle East perspective, they're spinning your face. Mm-hmm. Now, all those individuals that you might say, and this is what the Central Intelligence Agency would say as well, we haven't had people on the ground in Iran, but we still have, our ability to affect Iran, supposedly meaning that we got assets on the ground. You just burned all your assets because you took the biometrics and you gave it to the Chinese. So whoever you had that you had trained and figured that would be your resource on the ground after you left to be your human intelligence, you just gave the information to the lowest ranking Taliban member. So again, when we talk about this, they will always find a way out. They're going to say, well, it was a contractor that had it. It wasn't something that fell under Department of Defense. Department of Defense managed the contract, but really it was contracted to a third party. And all those individuals, some of them who even worked at the State Department, were not even considered important enough to be SIVs. Today, right now, Iran is working with the Taliban to find those guys and squeeze them, because the State Department doesn't want to evacuate them because they were never put on the SIV list. And those guys who work directly inside of the embassy are not turning around and pointing to all the resources that even the regional security officer had in his office. Why? Because he walked past these people when he went into Saddam to talk to RSO. We have across the board, from the Central Intelligence Agency all the way into the Department of Defense, Department of State, either have completely a major debacle because the person in charge gave him the authorities, but he wasn't able to run the country, that allowed a bureaucrats just absolutely burn everything to the ground for the needs of their bureaucracy to exist, or it was done intentionally by a few individuals who you and me will never probably see sitting on the TV and having these discussions. For what? And I don't know. I don't see it as an end for the United States. And I'm hoping that what I said kind of covers at least a majority of the parts of your first two questions that you asked.
Okay, so basically you just came to the conclusion that regardless of the fact that UCMJ is not really going to be of use in this situation, and no one's going to face any penalties except for maybe a subcontractor or contractor that hid in the corner. We're going to make one up over here. We create this entity and we're going to say they were involved. That's kind of funny when we got it all starts with the head, and that's the President of the United States. I mean, when I was in the CBs, I commanded my team. I was a W-2, and I didn't have time to play. And we, as CBs, we always say we can do, but guess what? If, as they say, when shit hits the curve, we're going to have to call fault on fault. And we're going to point to the person that's at fault, because my team don't die. My team, my friends, my family, my blood. In the United States military, team is family, blood. Everybody, American. We've got red, white, and blue on your shirt. You got red, white, and blue in your blood. You happy, you're an American. You stand beside it. The bottom line is, when you look at the UCMJ, it's strict on those orders. I mean, there's no reason to have a UCMJ or an ability to court martial if there is nobody you can actually point the finger at and say, you know something, you screwed up. I'm being nice with the word, but in the military we would have said literally, you fucked up.
Well, look, if you want, if as a person who used to be prior military, you could always bring him back, but they have to be holding military rank. 10 years from now, if we find out there was a general officer who had made a decision, or even a colonel who had made the decision.
As the president.
Yeah, we could always bring him back and we could break him down in rank and then apply UCMJ to him. But unfortunately, like I said, I think you can see already
the depth of it.
Yeah, the depth of it. And what happens is that the system is already going to start protecting him. 86% of the Democrats were asked, should we get Americans out? And it should be a no-brainer. 87% of Republicans were asked if we should get Americans out, no-brainer, and they all agreed. However, tomorrow, or I should say in 2022, the same people who agreed that we should get the Americans out, the current president is going to leave them on the battlefield. And some of them are going to die. A lot of them have to find their own way to get out and pay out of pocket. He's going to blame them. And by 2022, the same 86% of Democrats who said that, we should get them out are still going to walk in and they're going to vote Democratic, because party takes precedence over nation. And in this case, it's a Democrat. If it was a Republican, I would use the same thing, just so people know, I did run as a Republican in Illinois. But I always told the folks here that it's amazing. You can't move your finger from here to here, fraction of a move to vote out incompetence in your party. I've been told by folks in the Democratic Party here in Illinois, well, there's some good Democrats. And I told them, yeah, there were some good people in Germany, but they still burned the Jews to a crisp in an oven. That's why we had to kill a lot of those good people in the Dresden firebombing that we did. The reality is, if you don't break it, this corrupt regime, in that case in Germany, in this case this corrupt machine here, which was a feeder in the 2020 election, because it basically took the model from Illinois based on President Obama become president and applied it across the country. you're not going to be able to clean house. And I figured a while ago that the current POTUS made the decision, President Biden in this case, that, you know what, nobody blames Nixon for the fail of Saigon. Come 2022, 2024, nobody's going to blame me for what happened in Afghanistan, because by then I would have used media capability to tell people that it wasn't my fault. I've already paid money to the Taliban to get our Americans out, and people are not going to realize, well, you should be held, for justice for doing that. They're going to say, well, you know what, our people were stuck. It was their fault. They should have gotten out. If it was their fault, then I have to ask the Department of State, why were you still issuing visas for Americans to travel to Afghanistan past the deadline? The only thing you would see on the Department of State would be, don't travel to Afghanistan because of COVID. The same if you decide to look at traveling to Italy. So basically, from State Department perspective, they equated Italy and Afghanistan as the same, but yet they were issuing visas. So if I was a thinking person on the ground and I'm going to the State Department website and I continue to see that they're issuing visas past the deadline, and I know they are not processing any SIVs to leave the country, I would have figured the same. I'm telling you, the only way you have to get to this, it is incompetence to a level that you have to holistically fire everybody in the process, or it was done on purpose to leave equipment, now give money to the Taliban to make him a government. What did they need to be a strong government? Weapons and money in the billions.
Colonel, we've only got about a minute left, and I want to go to the last subject real quick. And that is, given the actions of the president, what do you think he should do now?
Well, he doesn't take advice from me. I would have said, don't give the place to the Chinese. The only thing he has left is one thing: stay there, get the Americans out. If you're not going to do that, because you need the Americans on the ground in order for you to turn on and give money to the Taliban to justify why you're giving him money, then that's fine. If you were going to use the Taliban and you wanted them to be empowered to use them to kill as many Chinamen along the Belt and Road Initiative, attacking their business interests, killing them, and the drones, sending them back as far as their initiative to control natural resources that they needed within the region for the next 10 years. Okay, I got it. I can understand that. But the reality is he's not going to do that. Unfortunately, I think the only choice he has now is to allow Afghanistan to implode. It has to get to a point where these guys are killing each other across the board. The Taliban killing Al-Qaeda, Al-Qaeda killing ISIS, ISIS-K killing so-and-so. It has to become an absolute mess. If you break it to a point where it freaking completely fails across the board, regardless of how many innocent people are getting killed, men and women, at least you're not countering China, but you have to be willing to allow Pakistan to fall at the same time. And notably, the president has never, ever called the prime minister of Pakistan since he took office to congratulate him on his victory, which is where we are today. And then that means there has to be a wider regional war between India and Pakistan. If you're not willing to go the entire route to allow it to get to that point, then get the Americans out, keep a force structure in the airfield and background, because guess who's moving in there right now? The Chinese are already moving in to build it. That means the Chinese military will be in background. That means that all aircrafts, to include finding out that there might be Warthogs, A-10s left there, are probably going to be used to launch attacks against American interests throughout the entire Middle East, from that in support of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the Chinese and the Russians.
Well, Colonel, it's been a pleasure, scary, but a pleasure to have you with us. How can people follow you?
If people want, they could look at the Near East Center for Strategic Engagement, necsc.net, or nec-sc.com. And then I'm also on Twitter at nec_sc. I'm also on Rumble and YouTube. I do have a new show called New Paradigms with Sargis Sangari. I have I broadcast every Monday. Today I have a show with Michael Prejan on the issues of Afghanistan. And I started that show because when I ran for office in 2020, because we couldn't walk around, meet anybody because of COVID.
Thank you for joining us today from the special report from Black and White. If you missed any of this show, go to blacksandwhites.us, click on the archive section, and you can hear this show and many others. Thanks for joining us on Black and White, where America speaks.